As you said, my name is Michelle Steele. I work for Capgemini, which is a global outsourcing, consulting and technology firm. We have around 180,000 employees globally across 40 countries. But my responsibility is as the head of HR analytics and systems in the UK. So I have responsibility for around 8,000 employees. I'll just skip forward. So I've worked with Capgemini for 10 years, never actually in recruitment, I'll be clear from the start. But the reason I've been invited to talk to you today is because we did a case study with the CIPD called Valuing Your Talent, which I'll give you the link at the end. Basically looking at how we blended all of our workforce data together into what started off as one tool for all of our HR functions, including recruitment. That's now expanded to a number of applications, which I'll talk about later. But really trying to blend the data that we already had, but that was being reported on in siloed, so that all of our HR teams could gain some insights from that, but particularly for recruitment, so they could see what happens to employees after they join the company. I think prior to now, we obviously get a view of how many candidates have joined, but not really then the retention of those, the performance, the productivity, etc. of those candidates. So this started off really from a desire from our own HR team, but also the leadership of the business. Capgemini is a people business, so they're our only asset, so we really need to use our workforce data to help drive business performance. So we did have an appetite from the business before we started off the work that we did. I don't know how many of you this resonates with, but each of our functions would report statically, looking backwards, generally responding to requests as and when needed, or for monthly reports, slide decks. We were always getting asked for ad hoc questions, I suppose, like how many graduates have we recruited, how many have we retained, but they would always be quite specific requests. Nobody was tying everything together to actually drill into that data and look to problem solve or to look past the specific question that was asked. I don't know, does that similar for anybody here? I know we've got some HR professionals and recruitment. So I will explain as well that we, as a global company, we have global systems in place that we can't change. So you will hear, I'm sure, from other suppliers at various conferences that can do a lot of this by inputting all data into one tool. But for us, we wanted to apply a quicker approach to blend the data that we currently had. There was also disjointed language in terms of how different parts of our UK business talked about people concepts. So even things like cost of recruitment or top talent, each team would have different definitions of what that actually means to them. So it was quite hard to give a UK view of what we were even talking about. And we really just wanted to pull everything together into one version of the truth, give access to the entirety of our HR team and all functions so they could all drill into the same data, and we wanted it to be very driven by the user so they could filter on their particular part of the business, grade of the employee, month of joining, month of leaving, all kinds of anything you could think of really. We wanted them to be able to drill into that. So the solution that we took, we partnered with Click. I don't know, does anybody use Click for dashboards? I see a couple of hands. So there are obviously lots of similar suppliers out there, but they are a business intelligence and visualization software supplier. And I will share with you later some screenshots. I'm not sure if those of you from the back will be able to see, but they'll be shared afterwards. And as I say, the case study link that I'll give you, there's lots of very clear screenshots in there of the application that we used. So this really, we wanted a tool that was an alternative to spreadsheets, as I've discussed before, would just be able to share all the key insights for all our users to use real time. So we wanted the data to feed in very regularly. At the minute we feed in from our core tool weekly, but we want to move that to daily, so we want users to be able to get to see very up-to-date information. the first step that we took was generating appetite with our HR directors. And what we found was creating a proof of concept with Click, using our own data really helped with that. So if any of you are trying to drive this kind of tool, that would be my advice, and that we talked about this for a while, but in terms of getting buy-in, and also buy-in from the various functions that we would need data from, showing them their data in this tool visualized really helped, because they could see what was possible. And the great thing with tools like Click is that once they're set up, myself and a colleague, we got designer training, so we can actually create bespoke applications ourselves and tailor it to what the users need, which is really, we find it great, because a lot of our tools are quite fixed, whereas this we can make it quite bespoke so that users can self-serve in the way that they need to. So our main HR system, the feed from that covered about 70% of the data that we wanted to feed in. And then we spoke to the heads of L&D, recruitment, finance, to ask them if we could get repeated data feeds with their data on project bookings, recruitment costs, recruitment source, L&D training hours, just whatever we could get our hands on, really. We agreed with them that we would get that on a regular basis and feed it in. And this really has just enabled us to see things in a completely different light, because we can more easily compare elements from those functions together against the data in the core HR tool. So really the main application shows an end-to-end life cycle of the employee. So I'll talk in a moment about the tabs that we have on that tool. But that was the idea, so that you could go in and see what has happened to an employee throughout the life cycle. So as I said, I'm guessing those of you at the back can't see these very clearly, but we will share them. We have now created 4 tools in Click, and we've also launched some pulse surveys to help us looking at exit surveys and onboarding. So we partnered with a company called Great With Talent, who do pulse surveys, and we survey joiners 3 months in, so that we can check how the reality of working at Capgemini is meeting their expectations. This has been particularly powerful because we've set it up that if they flag a concern or that they think they're leaving, it automatically tells the HR contact for that area, so they can go and have a conversation and find out what's gone wrong. Because we did notice through doing the work with Click that we were losing quite a few people around the 1 to 2 year mark, some even earlier. So we really wanted to understand what was going wrong so quickly. So those are 2 pulse surveys that we've put in place, and that data also feeds into the tool, so the recruitment teams and all the other HR users can see that as well. So the main application, the talent app, that's the one that we started with, and this has 7 areas of interest. So it covers key headcount data, so just number of FTEs, flexible resources, whether people are part-time, promotions, also the cost of employment, so we can show the average remuneration costs for employees. And we've also got some information there on gender split, which is something I'll come on to later, because we've also created a diversity application. The second area that we cover in the main tool is talent management. So we have a matrix, probably I'm guessing a lot of you have a similar approach, and within Click you can see the numbers in each of those quadrants, and you can click through to see the names of the employees that fit within those. So again, for the recruitment teams, we can look at the people that have joined and actually see how they're progressing in terms of potential and their performance. We also look at leavers, which is, I think, probably the key element that our business is the most interested at the moment. Everybody wants to be able to predict who's going to leave. So we have a section in there on that, which also, again, highlights top talent leavers, and we want it to, in the future, look at key skill leavers as well. All of that can be tied back to recruitment source, which is something which we're finding there seems to be a link between how people are hired and their retention. So again, that's something we weren't able to compare very easily before. We have a recruitment tab in itself, which looks at costs, so average costs, the source, and then that also, as I say, splits out the performance and potential of the joiners in any given period that the user has selected. Then we have sickness and L&D data as well, which again in the case study, if you're interested in that, you can see more about that. So something else that Capgemini is dealing with is gender imbalance. So I think in the IT industry generally, most companies have a similar issue at the moment in trying to recruit females and retain them into the organisation. So we created a separate diversity app as well, which, as you can see, for those of you that can see that screenshot in the bottom left there, mainly looks at how we recruit, retain and develop our female employees. We also have a predictive element in there, so our HR teams or any user of the application can go in and enter, if we were to recruit this many females and say no males for the next period of time, what impact would that actually have on the percentage proportion? Because I think we often targets are set that are quite unrealistic, and it's only when you actually go in and look at, well, how many females would we actually have to recruit, that you can see the targets are just not achievable. So that's been really useful in being able to show that to the business leads and say that this is where we're at. If you really want to get to here, you have to make some big changes. And we have our targets in the application, so it's very clear to see how we're progressing against those. We mainly look at females at different grades, and also specifically the hires of our graduate and apprentice population, because that's one area we really want to get even, if we can, in terms of recruiting males and females. The third app that we are looking at is what I've called their BI for managers. I think we need to find a more exciting name for that one, but it's something we're trialling, in that now that we've got this tool that's used by the HR teams, we would like to roll out a simpler version to managers in the business. So mainly so that they can see the same data real time as our HR teams, but also to save our teams going in and taking screenshots of this tool, putting it in a slide deck, which is what we wanted to get away from in the beginning, but there is always a need for presentations. So we thought if we give them direct access to the key data, then they can drill into it as well. And the fourth screenshot you can see there is a people heat map. So this is something that is being used by our resource managers, but also from a work-life balance lens as well. It basically shows where people live, and then you can filter it based on skills and project location. So if we want to see people who are living in Scotland but working in London and have been for quite a long time, we can actually see that quite very quickly. Also, if a resource manager wants to find particular skills in a location, they can do some filters, and it will show those little dots to identify them, and they can drill into exactly where they live and find out more about them. So that's one that we're rolling out at the moment. So I think that will develop and pick up pace. I think generally what we found with the tools is people have got very excited about them. So once they're out there, you're going to get a lot of requests for data. So we're constantly trying now to amend the tools to fit what users need, and also trying to train people and get them using it in the right way, so that it isn't just used for screenshots to go into slide presentations. So the next phase, really, now that we've got these tools in place, is, as I say, to move from that, from the analysis really to insight. So I feel like we've got some robust tools now that give the analysis in a very manageable way, but we now need to get our teams really curious about how to drill into the data. I think there's so much information there. We're moving into the realm of predictive analytics, and we've been doing a discovery project with a company called ClearSight, and that is picking up some interesting elements, particularly looking at attrition and productivity. So we are finding so far that there are links with recruitment source and attrition, but we're at the very early stages of that. But I think for us, we also want to make sure that we use the data that we have already. Even the onboarder and exit surveys, we get a lot of data from those, but I'm not convinced we're using that as fully as we can be. So I think once you start doing more and more analysis, people get quite used to it being there, and then it's just making sure that they continually look into it and take that next step, create hypotheses, try to use the data to answer those, and make some changes for the business. We're also looking at some new definitions. So there are, for example, cost to replace is something that we haven't really defined yet. I don't know if that's something anybody has defined in their organisation. I'd be quite interested to hear about it in the roundtables. But that's something we're keen to look at, because at the moment we can show the recruitment cost, but we don't think the business really appreciate all those extra costs that make up hiring versus us trying to actually retain people more. We're also trying to get more accurate skills data, because I think that will really help make this data even more meaningful. And we're also looking at doing more pulse surveys, mainly around non-hires, so trying to understand why people, particularly if we've offered and they're not joining, what is it that's putting them off, because that's a big population that we don't have data on at the moment. We're moving, or we're looking at new options for applicant tracking. So that's an area that we want to get to drill into more. And also satisfaction surveys, not just the onboarder and exit, but pulse surveys throughout the year, so that we can have more regular checkpoints, particularly with new joiners, because we don't want it just to be left at the 3 months and then we don't know what's happened after that. So we just want to generally get engagement or satisfaction scores from employees, so we can track that back against things like recruitment source and other elements. So that's where we are at the moment, really. I've added the link here for the full case study that we did with the CIPD. That will talk through the story of exactly what we did and has lots of screenshots of the tools. So I appreciate it's quite difficult to describe the tools without doing a live demo. So if you have a look at the case study, that will give you more information. And I'll be around for the roundtable, so if any of you have any questions, I'm happy to take them now, or if you want to put your hand up and I'll come over during the roundtables.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Michelle.